G'day, how's it going with you today? And especially, how's it going with those that you love the very most? I want you to think about your life just for a short moment. How's it going in areas of your relationships? What about your wealth, your finance? Are you going financially okay? How about your health? I mean, what's the good of having a fantastic relationship, wonderful lots of money, you've got absolutely no health to enjoy it with? Does God have any ability to help us succeed in all areas of life in a balanced fashion? Absolutely, yes, he does. We're going to spend the next 13 weeks together exploring the writings of one of the most famous prophets of the Old Testament Bible. Welcome to today's show. I'm James Toogood, and I think it's time we teased open one part of the Holy Bible that hardly gets opened in Christian pulpits around the world. What is this? This is the writings of Daniel, the Old Testament prophet. Why Daniel? Jerusalem was destroyed about 2,600 years ago. The Iraqi king took Jewish prisoners back to Iraq, his capital city, Babylon of the old world. There in Babylon, a young Jewish boy stays faithful to God and also stays faithful to his principles of health. He's surrounded by wealth and by luxury and by excessive living, except Daniel decides he's going to be true to his inner convictions. What is the result? His intelligence improves, way above those of his peers who live with him in Babylon. His health is just absolutely amazing. He lives to be a very, very old age. He succeeded financially because he rose to become the richest man in Babylon. What does that matter? Think about this. A Jewish boy rose to become the richest man in ancient Iraq 2,600 years ago. Could we repeat the story today? Well, welcome to the studio to Pastor Neil Thompson. How are you going?
Yeah, good, thanks, James.
That's a Christian story, isn't it?
It is a great story, that.
Yeah. And so there's two different ways you can look at this story.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, his is a rags to riches. It's the whole fairy tale right there.
Yeah, and the question I want to ask Neil is this: what about the rags to rags story? Because not all of us go from rags to riches.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the simple reality that it doesn't work for everyone in that sort of way. But that doesn't mean that it's not a great way to live. And so what Christianity offers people is a great way to live.
Okay, well look, the book of Daniel is another book of the Old Testament, and it has lots of wars in it and strife and destruction and commotion. How on earth could you find anything positive from that? I mean, you've heard the charges. Neil, you've heard that Christians started all the wars.
That's right. You know, so you know we can go through the Crusades and all those things, but just think about humanity for a moment. You know, when the Maoris arrived in New Zealand, the Maoris were there before them, and they systematically started wiping them out. And then you go through. You know, it's a phenomenon of people. Is basically what I'm saying. Is that people vie for power. When they push for power, they want to control others. They want to dominate. They want to wipe them out if they're a problem. And it's not just a problem for Christians, it's a problem for all religions. I mean, just look, Iraq was a secular nation once, but there was all sorts of battles going on, conflicts between various sects within the Islamic world, and it still goes on, you know, that kind of thing. So it's not a uniquely Christian problem, although Christians certainly have their fair share of bloodshed, that's true.
Yeah. So here's the point. The book of Daniel goes and predicts that there would be wars between nations and empires, even Christian nations, hundreds of years in advance. Just amazing tale.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, these great looks into the future. But I think one of the key things that comes through that, as it looks at and as it predicts the troubles that are going to come to the Christian church and many other things that we'll look at besides, one thing that I would want to make is that it seems to be there's not enough religion in the world, James, to help people to love one another. But there's enough religion in the world that makes them hate one another. And I think that's the problem, you know. Guys like Dawkins and others, they'll poke holes at Christians and say, see, look, you know, you start all these wars. But the reality is, are they genuinely, you know, people who follow the Christ or not?